Nobody knew that a single afternoon at a bustling Texas flea market could change a life, let alone two. The June sun hammered down on rows of colorful booths, 100 different voices calling out deals, scents of barbecue and frying oil swirling on the dry air. For 7-year-old Ella Morgan, these markets were half adventure, half ache, a tradition with her dad since the divorce. She missed her mom, missed the way weekends used to feel. But out here, she could almost pretend everything was normal. This Saturday was no different until Ella saw him. At first, she thought the heap of fur behind the faded tarp might have been a pile of rags. Then it moved, a tremble more than emotion, and 2 frightened brown eyes caught hers through a tangle of wire fencing. The German Shepherd was chained to the rear axle of an old pickup, ribs sharp under patchy fur, flies circling his ears. He flinched when a customer's child skipped too close, tried to back further into the shadows, but the chain held him fast. Next to him stood a man in dirty jeans and a sun-bleached cap, barking at passers-by. "Dog for sale, cheap, useless, won't guard, won't fetch. I'll practically pay you to take him." Ella's feet stopped moving. The noise and color of the market faded. She heard nothing but the frantic thump of her heart, saw nothing but the fear and defeat in that dog's eyes. In that instant, something inside her clicked, a stubborn hope she'd inherited from her mother, the kind that never let her walk past anything broken without trying to fix it. "Daddy," Ella tugged her father's hand. David Morgan, still adjusting to single parenthood, and his daughter's bottomless empathy, followed her gaze and sighed. "Honey, that's not our business. Let's keep moving, okay?" But Ella dug in her heels. "He's scared, Daddy. Look at him. He's not worthless. He's just alone." David tried to nudge her along, but Ella stayed rooted. She was a slight girl, thin, freckled, hair in a messy ponytail. But in moments like this, her stubbornness was legendary. A vendor across the aisle chuckled. "That's a wild one you've got there, sir." David tried reason, tried distraction, even offered a lemonade. But Ella was transfixed. When he finally relented, he let her approach the fence, warning her to keep her distance. The vendor eyed her suspiciously. "You interested, little miss?" Ella didn't answer. She crouched low, palms open, speaking softly so only the dog could hear. "Hey, buddy. It's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you." The shepherd shivered, but his gaze never left hers. Ella spotted a dry water bowl, a piece of bread gone hard as a rock. Without thinking, she fished a graham cracker from her bag and slid it through the wire. The dog sniffed, flinched, then inched forward, taking the treat with a shaking mouth. For a heartbeat, something passed between them, fragile, like the first rays of dawn after a storm. David checked his watch. "Ella, we really should—" "Can I come back tomorrow?" she blurted, eyes pleading. He hesitated, but when he looked at his daughter, at the hope lighting her face so rare since the divorce, he nodded. "We'll see." That night, Ella could barely eat. She drew pictures of the dog, naming him Zeus after her favorite hero in a library book, and talked about nothing else. David tried to temper her expectations. "That dog's been through a lot, honey. You can't save every stray. Sometimes people just give up." Ella glared. "Well, I won't." True to her word, the next day, Ella convinced her dad to return. She brought bits of chicken saved from her lunch, a soft old sock for comfort. The vendor sneered. "He don't like people, kid. Good luck." But Ella sat by the wire, humming softly, patient as stone. Zeus crept closer, taking the food with less fear this time. She whispered, "I'm coming back tomorrow, I promise." Each day for nearly a week, Ella made her pilgrimage. weathering sunburn, mosquito bites, and the snickers of older kids who called her the dog whisperer. Some vendors started recognizing her, shaking their heads in disbelief. The man with Zeus seemed more annoyed than grateful. "You want him that bad? I'll cut you a deal," he grunted on Friday, his eyes darting around as if he couldn't believe anyone would bother. David, watching his daughter, felt a growing conflict, a knot of fear and pride. He saw how gently she approached the animal, the way Zeus's tail twitched now instead of tucking under. But he also saw the dog's scars, physical and otherwise. "Ella, if we bring him home, it's not going to be easy. Dogs like that. Sometimes they never trust again." She looked up, fierce and fragile. "I'll never leave him. I promise, Daddy." David's voice wavered, but he nodded. "Okay, we'll try." The vendor barely waited for payment before unfastening the chain. Zeus cowered, eyes wide, but Ella stepped between him and the vendor, speaking in that same soft voice. "Come on, Zeus, you're safe now." It took nearly an hour to coax him into their car, but when he finally settled in the back seat, shivering and silent, Ella sat beside him, one small hand resting gently on his paw. "You're coming home, buddy. It's going to be okay." As they drove away, the market faded in the rearview mirror, but the weight of what they'd done settled in. Ella smiled through tears, whispering to her new friend, "We're in this together, Zeus, no matter what." But even as hope blossomed, David worried. Had he done the right thing? He glanced at Ella, saw her eyes shining with stubborn belief, and prayed she was right, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take a chance on someone the world has already given up on. The car ride home with Zeus was an awkward, tense adventure. Ella tried to sing softly, hoping her voice would soothe him, but Zeus pressed himself against the far door, staring at every passing car, and trembling so much Ella could feel it through the seat. David kept glancing in the rearview mirror, concern and doubt fighting for space in his mind. When they pulled into their modest Texas duplex, Zeus refused to move, his paws locked, body frozen. Ella slipped out, coaxing him with treats and quiet encouragement, but he stayed stubbornly inside, his ribs rising and falling in shallow breaths. David circled around and gently unlatched the car door, but Zeus wouldn't let either of them touch his collar. The stalemate lasted until the sun started to set, the air humming with cicadas. Finally, when David backed away and Ella knelt at a distance, Zeus stepped out, blinking at the unfamiliar yard. He slunk close to the ground, skittish and silent, his eyes always darting back to the car, as if afraid he'd be taken back. Ella had already prepared a spot for him, an old quilt, 2 water bowls, a bowl full of soft kibble, and a couple of squeaky toys from the thrift store. She sat on the porch steps, watching Zeus sniff the edges of the yard, his tail low and uncertain. She whispered, "It's okay. You're home, Zeus. No one's going to hurt you here." Inside, David watched from the window, his heart pounding. He'd agreed for Ella's sake, but as he saw the anxious dog flinch at every sound, he wondered if he'd made a huge mistake. What if Zeus snapped? What if Ella got bitten? What if this just made things harder for a little girl who'd already been through so much? The first night was rough. Zeus wouldn't come inside. He ignored the bed Ella made for him in the laundry room, and instead curled into a tight, shivering ball under the porch. Ella insisted on sleeping nearby, wrapped in her own blanket on the floor by the back door, but David gently carried her to bed. "We need to give him time, sweetheart. It's been a big day for him." Ella drifted off to sleep, clutching her stuffed bear, her dreams crowded with images of chains and angry voices, Zeus's eyes wide with fear. The next morning, Zeus was still there, silent, motionless, but watching Ella with those same haunted eyes. She left breakfast at the porch edge and read out loud from her favorite storybook, her voice a steady anchor in the soft dawn light. At first, Zeus only listened. Then, hesitantly, he nibbled the food. It was the smallest of victories, but to Ella, it was everything. Word spread quickly in their small neighborhood. Some kids were curious, others skeptical. At the playground, a few girls whispered, "Did you hear? Ella's family took in that scary flea market dog." Two older boys laughed. "She's crazy. That dog's gonna eat her alive." Ella heard them, her cheeks burning, but she kept her chin high. She refused to let their words touch the certainty she felt in her chest. Each day she devoted herself to Zeus. She spent hours in the backyard, sitting on the grass, reading stories, or just talking softly. Sometimes she'd slip him bits of leftover chicken or tiny pieces of cheese. When Zeus crept closer, she resisted the urge to reach out. She let him come on his own, at his own speed. Patience, her mom always said, is what makes the difference. David watched this daily ritual with a mixture of wonder and anxiety. He tried to help, offering treats, calling Zeus gently, but the dog would bolt at the sound of his deeper voice, hiding under the porch until only his nose showed. "I don't think he likes me much," David joked, trying to lighten the mood, but Ella only shrugged. "He'll learn you're safe, Daddy. Some hearts heal slow, right?" One afternoon, a group of kids gathered at the edge of their yard, tossing pebbles and making barking noises. "Hey, Ella, does your dog even have teeth? Bet he's too scared to bark." Ella stood tall, fists clenched. "Leave him alone. He's not ready for friends yet." Later, she found Zeus shivering in the bushes, too scared to eat. That night, she sat beside him under the porch, whispering, "I'll never leave you, I promise." She repeated it every day, a gentle mantra she hoped he could understand. Zeus watched her with tired, confused eyes, but slowly she saw a shift. His ears lifted when she came outside. He started eating his meals, little by little. Sometimes at night, he'd creep onto the porch to listen to Ella sing lullabies through the screen door. David's doubts didn't vanish. He worried constantly about Ella's safety, about Zeus's unpredictable nature, about what would happen if things went wrong. But he couldn't deny the hope he saw in Ella's eyes. It was a look he hadn't seen since before the divorce, when family meant laughter at the dinner table and lazy Saturdays with no one missing. The first time Zeus let Ella touch him, it was almost by accident. She was tracing a picture of a dog in her book with her finger, whispering, "This one looks like you, but you're even braver," when Zeus shuffled close enough for his fur to brush her hand. Ella froze, hardly daring to breathe, and Zeus stayed still. Then, slowly, he pressed his head into her palm. Ella's breath caught, her eyes filled with tears. "Good boy, Zeus," she whispered, careful not to move too quickly. He stayed there for several long minutes, soaking in the gentle contact, as if trying to remember what kindness felt like. David watched from the kitchen window, phone ready to call for help if needed. But he saw the way Ella's hand trembled with joy, and the way Zeus's eyes softened. Something unspoken passed between them. Trust, fragile but growing. The next day at school, Ella was called dog crazy again. She tried to explain, but her words came out tangled and shy. Only Maya, her best friend, listened with wide, worried eyes. "Isn't he dangerous?" Maya asked. "He's just scared," Ella replied, her voice fierce, like I was after my mom left. "He just needs someone to believe in him." At home, David pulled Ella aside. "Are you sure you want to keep doing this, honey? It's a lot of work, and I don't want to see you get hurt." Maybe, maybe it was a mistake. Ella shook her head. He needs me, Daddy. And I need him too. David sighed, hugging her close. Okay, we'll give him a chance. But you have to promise to be careful, all right? Ella nodded, a stubborn light in her eyes. She'd made a promise, and she meant to keep it, no matter what it took. And so, day by day, step by halting step, a broken dog and a determined girl started to heal together. The road would not be easy. Ella could sense storms still on the horizon. But as she watched Zeus finally wag his tail, just a little, she knew she'd chosen right. For both of them, this was the beginning of something big. Morning sunlight streamed through Ella's window, painting golden stripes across her quilt as she woke to the gentle sound of birds outside. It had been nearly a week since Zeus came home, but every morning felt like the first, a mixture of excitement and worry, hope and fear. Ella's first thought was always the same. How is Zeus today? She tiptoed outside in her pajamas, clutching her favorite storybook under one arm and a bag of dog treats in the other. Zeus was curled under the porch, head on his paws, eyes flickering open as she approached. He didn't bolt this time, just watched her with that cautious look she was learning to understand. She settled herself on the top step, cross-legged, not too close but not too far either, and opened her book. "You ready for chapter 4? She whispered. "It's a good one." Her dad had told her once that talking to animals was silly, but Ella knew better. She read slowly, letting her voice float out soft and steady, the words a gentle background to the morning's peace. Zeus listened, his ears twitching at the rhythm, his breathing slow and deep. When she finished the chapter, she tossed him a treat. He crept forward to eat it, then retreated back to his safety zone. This became their daily ritual. After school, while other kids were at soccer practice or glued to their phones, Ella was in the backyard, reading or just sitting quietly. Some days, she talked about her mom, how things had changed since the divorce, how lonely it could feel sometimes. She knew Zeus understood. In the way animals do, he didn't judge, didn't interrupt, just listened, blinking slowly as if saying, "Me too." David, trying to be helpful, would occasionally come out with a ball or a tug toy, but Zeus would freeze at the sound of his deeper voice or sudden movements. "Sorry, buddy," David would say, hands raised in surrender. "I'll let Ella handle this." He wasn't sure if it hurt more to see the dog shy away or to see the way Ella's patience never wavered. He wanted to be part of the healing, but something told him his role was mostly to stay out of the way. One afternoon, while Ella was reading, she remembered a phrase her mom used to say, "Some hearts heal slow." She'd never really understood what it meant until now. Sometimes she felt frustrated. Why wouldn't Zeus just trust them? Why was he still so scared after all this time? But then she'd look at his thin frame and haunted eyes, and she'd remind herself that trust wasn't something you could rush. After 2 weeks, the first breakthrough happened. It was just after sunset, the sky deepening from pink to purple, when Ella noticed Zeus standing closer than usual. She held her breath, unsure what to do. She stayed perfectly still, her hands resting on her knees. Zeus took a tentative step forward, then another, until his nose was nearly touching her arm. Very slowly she reached out, letting her hand rest on the ground beside him. For a long moment nothing happened. Then, as if gathering all his courage, Zeus lowered his head and rested it on her lap. Ella didn't move, hardly dared to breathe. Tears pricked her eyes as she looked down at the battered dog, finally letting himself be vulnerable. "Good boy," she whispered, stroking his ears so gently she barely felt the fur. For Zeus, it was a leap of faith. For Ella, it was proof that her patience was working. That night, she wrote in her diary, her handwriting shaky with excitement. Zeus let me touch him today. I think he's starting to trust me. I won't let him down. I promise. The next morning, Zeus wagged his tail. Just a tiny flick, but enough for Ella to notice. She beamed at him, her own joy contagious. See? We're getting there, buddy. Still, progress wasn't always in a straight line. Some days, Zeus would seem braver, taking treats from her hand, nosing her gently. Other days, he'd retreat again, startled by a neighbor's lawnmower or a car backfiring in the street. Ella learned to accept the setbacks, to celebrate the little victories without getting discouraged by the steps backward. Healing, she decided, was a dance. One step forward, 2 steps back, but always moving, always trying. David did his best to support them. He built a simple fence around the yard, so Zeus could roam a little without fear of escape. He ordered books about dog training and watched videos late into the night, hoping to learn something that might help. He even sat in the grass a few times, reading quietly like Ella did, hoping Zeus might get used to his presence. Sometimes Zeus would come a little closer. David tried not to take it personally when the dog still flinched away. Give him time, Ella told her dad, repeating her mom's wisdom. Some hearts heal slow. Ella's friends started asking questions at school. Why do you spend so much time with that dog? Isn't he still scared? Ella would just smile. He's getting better. You have to be patient. Maya, her best friend, was still afraid of dogs, but she began coming over more, sitting on the porch steps with Ella, keeping her distance but watching with curiosity. Maybe one day I'll pet him too, Maya whispered. Ella squeezed her hand. Maybe one day. One evening, after a particularly hard day at school, Ella sat with Zeus in the fading light. She didn't read or talk, just sat quietly, letting the silence wrap around them. Zeus edged closer, sensing her mood. Finally, she leaned her head against his side, feeling his steady heartbeat beneath the scarred fur. For the first time, Zeus didn't pull away. He simply stayed, his presence a silent comfort. As the weeks passed, the bond between girl and dog deepened. They became a team, 2 survivors, learning to trust again. Zeus began following Ella around the yard, tail wagging a little more each day. He'd nudge her hand with his nose when he wanted attention, or flop down beside her in the grass for a nap. The nightmares that had plagued Ella since her mom left began to fade, replaced by dreams of running through fields with Zeus at her side. One Saturday, David found Ella asleep in the backyard, her head resting on Zeus's flank. The dog watched him approach, tense but not fearful. David knelt down and stroked Ella's hair. "You two make quite a pair," he murmured. Zeus blinked at him, and for the first time didn't shrink away. That night, as Ella drifted off to sleep, she whispered to Zeus, "Thank you for trusting me. I won't ever leave you. We're family now." In the darkness, she felt the dog's gentle nuzzle against her hand, a silent promise that they'd keep healing, together, one small step at a time. Just as spring painted the neighborhood in bursts of wildflowers and birdsong, things finally seemed to be smoothing out for Ella and Zeus. Their daily routine had become a comfort, reading together on the porch, exploring the backyard, and the quiet moments when Zeus would rest his head on Ella's lap, both of them content and, for once, unafraid. But healing is never a straight line. Setbacks, as Ella would learn, come when you least expect them. One Saturday, while David was mowing the front lawn, Ella invited Maya over to sit on the back steps. It was Maya's first time getting close to Zeus. She'd always admired from afar, but after weeks of hearing about Ella's patient friendship with the dog, Maya worked up the courage to visit. Ella explained all the rules. Move slow, no loud noises, let Zeus come to you. Maya nodded, fidgeting nervously. At first, Zeus only peeked at Maya from behind Ella's legs, suspicious but not aggressive. Ella beamed. See? He's getting used to you already. They sat side by side, sharing stories about school and drawing pictures with sidewalk chalk. For a while, it felt like any normal afternoon. The girls laughed about their teacher's new haircut and traded secrets about their favorite songs. Zeus watched, ears perked, eyes following every gesture. But then, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, the peace shattered. Across the fence, a neighbor's toddler, barely 3 years old, squealed with excitement and banged a toy truck against the slats, startling Zeus out of his fragile calm. His head shot up, hackles rising, and a low, defensive growl rumbled from his throat. The toddler froze, wide-eyed, and then burst into tears. The sound carried across yards. Within moments, the neighbor, a woman named Mrs. Willis, appeared at her back door, scowling. "Control that dog, David!" she yelled, her voice sharp with fear. "He's dangerous!" David hurried over, apologizing and assuring her that Zeus was just scared. But Mrs. Willis had already made up her mind. She snatched up her child and glared at Ella and Maya, as if they were accomplices in some crime. "If that dog ever comes near my boy, I'll call animal control." Word spread fast. By the next morning, rumors had already begun swirling. Zeus, the scary dog from the flea market, was now the dangerous dog on Maple Street. Ella heard older kids whisper about Zeus in the lunch line. At recess, a group of girls circled her, their voices taunting. "Why would you want a freaky dog like that?" one sneered. "He's gonna bite someone. Just you wait," another chimed in. Ella felt heat flush her cheeks, but she wouldn't cry. Not in front of them. She clenched her fists and walked away, trying to ignore their words. But each step felt heavy. She knew Zeus wasn't bad. He was just scared. But how could she explain that to people who wouldn't listen? Even Maya, usually brave, was shaken. "Ella, maybe your dad should give Zeus back," she said quietly as they walked home. "What if he really does hurt someone?" Ella stopped in her tracks. "He would never. He's just nervous. People don't understand." That afternoon, Ella found Zeus curled under the porch, trembling. She sat beside him, tears threatening. "It's not your fault," she whispered. "You're not dangerous. I know you're good." But the doubts grew. David noticed Ella's silence at dinner. He tried to reassure her, but worry flickered in his eyes. He didn't want to lose Zeus, but he also feared what would happen if things got worse. The memory of the vendor's words haunted him. "That dog's nothing but trouble." Ella needed help. She remembered something she'd seen at the library, a flyer for a local dog trainer who specialized in nervous and difficult dogs. The trainer, Miss Carla, was famous for helping dogs others had given up on. Ella begged her dad to call. Miss Carla arrived on a warm Thursday afternoon, wearing jeans, sneakers, and a calming smile. She knelt in the yard, letting Zeus sniff her hand, never making sudden moves. Her voice was low and reassuring. "He's got a gentle soul," she told Ella and David after watching them interact. "But he's been hurt. Trust takes time." She introduced them to positive reinforcement, tiny treats for calm behavior, gentle words instead of raised voices, and daily routines that built confidence. She taught Ella how to read Zeus's body language, to know when he was stressed and when he needed space. David learned to soften his tone and approach, letting Zeus set the pace. To Ella's delight, Maya decided to try too. She came over after school, sitting farther away at first, hands in her lap. Miss Carla showed her how to toss treats gently toward Zeus, never pushing too hard. Little by little, Zeus inched closer. Maya still flinched if Zeus barked, but with Ella and Miss Carla guiding her, she began to trust that he wouldn't hurt her. Progress was slow, but every step mattered. The first time Zeus let Maya pet him, it felt like a miracle. Ella snapped a picture, both girls beaming. "See, he's learning," Ella said, pride swelling in her chest. Still, the whispers didn't stop. Some neighbors watched from their windows, eyeing Zeus with suspicion. Mrs. Willis made a show of crossing the street when she saw Ella walking Zeus on a leash. But a few neighbors, curious and more open-minded, began asking questions. An older man named Mr. Ramirez offered Zeus a biscuit from his porch. "Used to have a dog like that," he said with a wink. "Takes time, but they come around." One evening, after a particularly tough day at school, Ella sat in the backyard with Zeus's head in her lap. She stroked his ears, thinking of everything Miss Carla had taught her. "We can't control what people think," she whispered, "but we can show them who you really are." Miss Carla's visits became a bright spot in their week. She showed David how to play simple games with Zeus, find the treat, follow the leader, and gentle tug-of-war. Zeus, once terrified of male voices, began to accept David inch by inch. The first time Zeus took a treat from David's hand, Ella clapped with delight. Best of all, Maya started to visit more often, her confidence growing each time. She even invited another friend, Tommy, who'd been afraid of dogs since a bad encounter as a toddler. Tommy watched Maya and Ella, curiosity winning over fear. "Maybe I'll pet him next time," he said, grinning. The transformation was slow, with setbacks and surprises, but the Morgan house began to fill with hope again. Laughter echoed across the yard as Zeus played his first game of fetch, Maya and Tommy cheering him on. Even David smiled more, seeing the change in his daughter and the dog he'd almost given up on. Ella realized healing wasn't just about her and Zeus anymore. It was about reaching out, teaching others, and letting kindness ripple out into the world. In the face of doubt and fear, Ella, with a little help, was building a circle of trust, one gentle act at a time. And so, as the spring deepened, Ella, Zeus, and their new friends pressed forward, undaunted by whispers, strengthened by every small victory, and determined to prove that even the deepest scars could fade in the warmth of friendship and patience. The Texas summer crept in, making the evenings long and golden, with a sticky warmth that clung to the skin and painted the sky in streaks of orange and rose. Zeus had been at Ella's side for a few months now. Every small victory in their journey was hard won. The first time Zeus greeted David at the door with a tentative wag, the way he would now nap in the middle of the living room instead of hidden in a corner, the slow thawing between Zeus and Maya, who'd started sitting a little closer during backyard story time. Even some of the neighbors, those who had once glared or whispered, now nodded in cautious greeting. But behind every good day was the memory of that Saturday, the echoes of a growl, and the cold stares of people who didn't understand. David tried to reassure Ella. "He's come a long way, sweetheart. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Still, Ella couldn't help but notice the wary looks whenever she and Zeus walked the neighborhood, the way parents steered their children away or crossed the street. At school, the teasing had shifted from laughter to uneasy silence. "Her dog's dangerous," someone whispered one morning. "You never know." Yet Ella's bond with Zeus was unshakable. She trusted him, and she hoped, desperately, that one day others would too. That chance came sooner than anyone expected. It was a Sunday afternoon, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Ella convinced her dad to let her take Zeus on a walk down the greenbelt behind their block, a stretch of scrubby grass and oak trees where the neighbors often let their dogs run. Zeus walked beside her, a little tense, ears swiveling at every distant bark, but calmer than he'd ever been in a crowd. As they rounded a bend, Ella spotted Mrs. Willis walking her own terrier, Max, at the far end of the field. Ella instinctively tightened her grip on Zeus's leash. "We'll just keep to our side," she murmured, stroking Zeus's head. But that plan didn't last. Out of nowhere, a commotion erupted. A dog's furious barking, shouts, and the unmistakable sound of metal scraping pavement. A large, muscular pit bull had wriggled free from its collar and came charging down the greenbelt, teeth bared, hackles raised. Its owner, a teenage boy, shouted desperately, but the pit bull was already barreling toward Ella, Zeus, and Max. Max yelped and tried to bolt, but Mrs. Willis shrieked, stumbling back. Ella's heart jumped into her throat. Zeus stiffened, eyes locked on the approaching danger. Before Ella could react, Zeus placed himself between her and the onrushing pit bull, planting his feet and lowering his head, every muscle taut. "Zeus, no!" Ella gasped. But Zeus wouldn't move. The pit bull lunged, barking wildly, aiming straight for Ella. In a flash, Zeus met the attacker head-on, not with violence, but with a forceful, unyielding presence. He let out a deep, resonant bark, not of fear, but of warning. The two dogs circled each other, Zeus never letting the pit bull get close to Ella or Max. The standoff was tense. The air thrummed with electricity. David, who had been trailing behind with a water bottle, dropped everything and sprinted to his daughter's side. He reached them just as the pit bull's owner grabbed his dog's collar and dragged him away, muttering apologies and looking shaken. Max was whimpering. Mrs. Willis was white as a sheet, but Zeus stood guard, his body still positioned protectively in front of Ella. For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Zeus turned and nuzzled Ella's hand, whining softly as if asking if she was all right. Ella knelt and hugged him, tears springing to her eyes. "You saved me. You saved all of us." The neighbors gathered, drawn by the commotion. At first, there were shocked murmurs. Then something remarkable happened. Mrs. Willis, who had been so afraid, came over and knelt beside Zeus, hands trembling. She looked at Ella and David, then at the dog. He protected you," she stammered. "He protected all of us." Word of the incident spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People who had once eyed Zeus with suspicion now looked at him with awe and gratitude. The kids who had once called him dangerous asked if they could pet him. Even the local mail carrier, who'd always avoided their house, brought Zeus a biscuit the next morning. The next day at school, Maya grabbed Ella's hand and pulled her into a circle of curious classmates. "Tell them what happened," Maya urged. Ella described the walk, the attack, and how Zeus had stepped in front of her. How he hadn't barked or bit, just protected. The teacher, overhearing, praised Zeus in front of the whole class. That's what loyalty and love can do. Sometimes the ones we fear the most have the biggest hearts. At home, David was almost in tears as he recounted the story to Miss Carla, the gentle dog trainer who had been helping Ella and Zeus for weeks. Miss Carla smiled. "He's learned to trust you, and he knows his job now. You gave him a chance, Ella. He just proved he deserved it." The neighborhood changed after that. Zeus was no longer the outcast, the scary dog chained up at the flea market. He was a hero, a dog who stood between a child and danger, who protected without hesitation. The parents who had once whispered now nodded at David on the street. Kids drew pictures of Zeus and hung them in the school hallway. Even David felt something shift. That evening, as Zeus lay at Ella's feet, David sat beside his daughter on the porch, looking out at the quiet yard. "I was wrong to doubt him," he admitted, "and I was wrong to doubt you. You believed in him, even when nobody else did. I'm proud of you, Ella." Ella leaned against her dad, the bond between them healing in ways neither of them had expected. "Thanks, Daddy. I knew he was good. He just needed someone to show him." David scratched Zeus behind the ears, grinning. "Well, he sure showed us." As dusk settled, Ella watched Zeus doze at her feet, finally at peace. She knew there would be more challenges ahead. She'd seen the worry in her dad's eyes, and she still heard whispers from a few stubborn neighbors. But now, she had hope. The dog she'd saved had saved her, too. That night, as Ella drifted off to sleep, she whispered to Zeus, "You're my hero. I'll always stand by you, just like you stood by me." And in the stillness of her small Texas bedroom, she knew, no matter what the world might say, she and Zeus had each other. And that was enough. The world had shifted for Ella and Zeus. Since the day he'd saved her and Max from the rampaging pit bull, Zeus was no longer the misunderstood outcast. Neighbors who once whispered and crossed the street now waved as Ella passed. At school, her classmates wanted to hear about Zeus's bravery over and over. David's faith in the old German shepherd was unshakable. Their small house, once heavy with the ache of the divorce, now buzzed with laughter and hope. But as the old saying goes, every calm hides the memory of a storm. Trouble was on its way, shadows stretching from Zeus's painful past, determined to test everything they'd built. It started on a sleepy Friday afternoon. Ella and Maya were in the backyard, practicing the touch command that Miss Carla had taught them, when David got a phone call. The voice on the other end was instantly recognizable, raspy, bitter, and sharp as broken glass. It was the flea market vendor, the man who had chained Zeus to the axle and called him worthless. "You got my dog," the vendor snarled, skipping any pleasantries. "And I want him back." David's stomach tightened. "He's not your dog. You sold him to us, remember? He's family now." The vendor laughed, cold and angry. "Didn't sell. Just let you take him for a while. The law says he's mine." He hung up before David could argue. An icy dread settled over the house. That night, Ella found her dad sitting at the kitchen table long after midnight. Papers spread around him. Adoption records, receipts, anything that might prove Zeus belonged with them. On Sunday, the threat arrived in person. The family was just finishing breakfast when a battered pickup truck rumbled to a stop in front of the house. Ella peered through the blinds. The vendor climbed out, his shadow long and mean across their driveway. Zeus shrank under the table, trembling. The man didn't bother to knock. He pounded on the door so hard the windows rattled. "That's my dog, and I'll call the cops if you don't hand him over." David stepped outside, careful to close the door behind him. Ella clung to Zeus, her heart thudding, as she watched her father and the vendor argue on the porch. Voices rose. The vendor waved papers in David's face. Old, faded documents, nothing that looked official. "You stole from me," he shouted. "That's theft. I want him back now." David's jaw clenched. "If you cared about Zeus, you never would have left him chained up, half-starved. You called him worthless. My daughter saved his life. He's not going anywhere." The vendor spat on the porch. "You'll regret this. See you in court." He stormed back to his truck, tires squealing as he sped off. Ella felt her knees buckle. Zeus licked her hand, sensing her fear. That night, Worry wound itself around every heart in the Morgan household. Ella lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the image of Zeus chained up, dragged away to that awful flea market. She tried to reassure him, soft words, gentle hugs, but her own voice shook. Sleep brought no comfort. She dreamed of cold chains, barking vendors, and Zeus's brown eyes, wide and desperate. She woke crying, and Zeus pressed himself into her side, both of them needing the reassurance of touch. The next day, Miss Carla came by for a training session. Ella told her everything, voice trembling. Miss Carla listened carefully, her calm presence a balm against the rising panic. "This isn't your fault, Ella," she said gently. "And you're not alone. We'll help you fight for Zeus." Miss Carla suggested that they document every step of Zeus's progress. Photos of his healing, notes about his temperament, statements from neighbors. "If it comes to court, we'll show how much he's changed, and that you're the best home he could ever have." Maya's family was the first to step up. Maya's mom wrote a heartfelt letter about Ella's patience and Zeus's transformation. "I was afraid of Zeus at first," Maya admitted. "But he's the gentlest dog I know. He's my friend, too." Word spread through the neighborhood. Mr. Ramirez, the old man who had offered Zeus biscuits, added his voice. "I seen that dog chained up at the flea market. He was half dead. Now he's a new animal. That little girl saved him." Even Mrs. Willis, the once fearful neighbor, offered to write a letter. "He saved my son from that pit bull. That dog belongs with Ella." David called a local attorney, Linda Brooks, who specialized in animal welfare. She met with the family in their living room, her voice warm but her eyes sharp. "You did everything right," Linda said, flipping through David's folder of paperwork. "You have receipts, vet bills, even witness statements. But the vendor could still cause trouble, especially if he tries to use scare tactics or outdated paperwork." Ella asked the question that haunted her most. What if they make us give Zeus back?" Linda shook her head. "We'll fight. We have the truth, and we have community support. Judges care about what's best for the animal, and clearly that's right here." Despite Linda's reassurances, the stress gnawed at Ella. She began having nightmares again. At school, her friends noticed she was quieter, more distracted. Maya squeezed her hand. "We'll get through this. Zeus is family. We won't let them take him." At home, the mood was tense. David worked late, reviewing legal documents. Ella clung to every moment with Zeus, cuddling him after school, reading him stories, even sneaking him pieces of her dinner. Each time Zeus whimpered or flinched at a loud noise, Ella's fear grew. What if she lost him now, after everything they'd survived together? But there was also an unexpected comfort. Neighbors left casseroles and handwritten notes on their porch. Miss Carla offered extra training sessions, helping Zeus stay calm during stressful moments. Even kids at school rallied around Ella, asking for updates and drawing pictures of her and Zeus for luck. One afternoon, as the sky darkened with the threat of rain, David found Ella and Zeus sitting side by side in the yard. He sat next to them, his voice quiet but steady. "No matter what happens, we won't give up on Zeus. We're his family now. We're in this together." Ella wiped her eyes and nodded, clinging to hope. She buried her face in Zeus's fur and whispered, "I'm not giving up. Not now, not ever." As thunder rumbled in the distance, the three of them huddled close, drawing strength from each other. Trouble from the past had come knocking, but this time Ella and Zeus had an army of friends and family standing with them. Whatever happened next, they would face it, together. The day of the hearing arrived with thick gray clouds pressing low against the Texas sky, as if even the weather sensed what was at stake. Ella woke before dawn, her stomach twisted in anxious knots. Zeus seemed to know something was different. He stuck close to her side all morning, following her from room to room with silent, worried eyes. David tried to reassure his daughter as he helped her into a blue dress. "You just tell the truth," he said, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "You've already done the hardest part. Today we just let them see what we all know. Zeus belongs with you." The courthouse in their small town was both grand and intimidating, its red bricks looming above the quiet main street. Inside, the halls echoed with the squeak of shoes and low voices. Linda Brooks, their attorney, greeted them with a firm handshake and a confident smile. "We're ready," she said, her tone calm and steady. "I've seen plenty of cases like this. The truth is on our side." But Ella's heart still pounded as they entered the courtroom. The flea market vendor sat on the opposite bench, his jaw tight, his hat clenched in his hands. He glared at Ella and David, his eyes promising trouble. The judge, a woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled into a neat bun, called everyone to order. The vendor's lawyer went first, waving yellowed papers and old photographs. "My client was forced to give up the dog under duress," he claimed. "Zeus was taken without proper payment. My client wants what is rightfully his returned." Linda stood, calm and deliberate. She presented David's receipts, the small crumpled bill of sale from the flea market, the veterinary bills, and photos of Zeus's condition the day he came home. Thin, filthy, and shaking with fear. "This is not just a property dispute," Linda argued, her voice ringing clear. "It's about the welfare of a living creature who was neglected and found hope in a new family. The Morgans didn't steal Zeus. They saved him." The vendor's lawyer objected, but the judge silenced him with a glance. Then came the testimony. First, David spoke. He told of how Zeus came to them broken, how Ella spent weeks earning his trust, and how the dog's transformation had changed their lives. "My daughter has shown more patience and compassion than most adults I know," David said, voice wavering. "Zeus is family now. Taking him away would break both of their hearts." The vendor scoffed, muttering under his breath. When he was called to the stand, he insisted that Zeus was always mean, that no one could fix a dog like that. He described Zeus as property, a thing, not a living being with feelings. "I lost good money on that mutt," he growled, "and I want him back." Linda brought forward their next witnesses, Miss Carla, the gentle dog trainer, who spoke with calm authority about Zeus's progress. "With the Morgans, Zeus has learned trust and safety," she explained. "He's not aggressive. He was traumatized. Ella and David gave him the stability every dog deserves." Maya and her mother took the stand next, their hands clasped tight. Maya's voice shook, but she spoke bravely. "Zeus was scared at first, but Ella never gave up on him. Now he's my friend too. He saved us when that other dog attacked." Her mother nodded, adding, "Our whole neighborhood has seen the difference. Zeus is part of this family and this community now." Even Mrs. Willis, who had once feared Zeus, gave her testimony. She described the day Zeus had stood between her son and the loose pit bull. "If not for Zeus," she said, her voice trembling, "my little boy could have been hurt. He's a hero." Ella's turn came last. She climbed up to the witness seat, her feet barely touching the floor, and stared out at the judge. Her palms were sweaty, and her voice wobbled at first. But when she looked over at Zeus, waiting with David and Linda, tail thumping softly, she found her courage. "Zeus isn't just my dog," Ella said. "He's my family, When we met him, he was chained up, scared, and nobody cared about him. People called him worthless and dangerous. But he isn't. He just needed someone to believe in him. She looked right at the vendor, her voice growing stronger. I saved him. But he saved me, too. My mom left, and my house felt empty. But Zeus made me feel less alone. He taught me how to be brave, how to love again, even when you're scared. Please don't make us say goodbye. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Zeus's tail gently swishing. The judge sat back, thoughtful, and called a recess to consider the evidence. Ella sat with Zeus and David in the hallway, every minute stretching into eternity. Finally, they were called back in. The judge cleared her throat, her voice solemn but kind. This is not a case of property, but of responsibility and care. The Morgans have demonstrated extraordinary commitment, patience, and love for Zeus. The evidence of neglect in the past is clear, and the testimony of this community shows how much this dog has changed and how much he is loved. She turned to the vendor. You are barred from owning pets in the future. Zeus will remain with Ella and David Morgan. The breath Ella had been holding whooshed out. David hugged her, and Zeus nuzzled his way in, tail thumping so hard it echoed off the bench. Maya cheered. Miss Carla wiped away a tear. Even a few people in the back row clapped quietly, touched by the story they'd just witnessed. Outside, the clouds had broken. Sunlight streamed through, painting the courthouse steps in gold. News spread quickly. By dinner time, nearly everyone in town knew that Zeus was home to stay. Ella held Zeus's head in her hands, pressing her forehead to his. We did it, she whispered. I told you I'd never leave you. That night, their house overflowed with laughter and celebration. Neighbors dropped by with cookies and cards. Maya's family brought over a giant rawhide bone for Zeus, who paraded it around the living room with pride. Even Mrs. Willis stopped by, hugging Ella tightly. Thank you for fighting for him, she said. He's made all of us braver. David stood at the window later, watching Ella and Zeus curled together on the couch. For the first time in a long while, he felt whole. The family he'd feared was lost was still here, changed and mended by love and stubborn hope. The scars of Zeus's past would never fully disappear, but the chains were gone for good. In their place were new bonds, built not of iron and fear, but of trust, loyalty, and the quiet, stubborn love that had saved them both. And as the sun set on that unforgettable day, Ella whispered to Zeus, no matter what happens, you're my family, forever. In the days after the courtroom victory, it was as if a light had been switched on in Ella's small Texas town. What began as whispers of relief soon blossomed into full-throated celebration. The local newspaper ran a front-page story. Chained dog becomes community hero. Young girl's faith changes everything. People Ella had never met stopped her on the street to ask about Zeus or to tell her how moved they were by their story. Strangers left treats and handwritten notes of congratulations on their doorstep. For the first time in a long time, Ella felt truly seen, not just as the quiet girl with the nervous dog, but as someone who had made a real difference. It was David who first suggested they do more. He found Ella sitting in the backyard, Zeus's head in her lap, as she read aloud from a battered library book. What if we helped other dogs like Zeus? David said, lowering himself onto the porch steps. Maybe we could volunteer at the animal shelter on Saturdays, you and me. He hesitated, then added, it would be good for both of us. We could show other families that second chances are worth it. Ella's eyes widened. Do you think they'd let us? She asked, excitement bubbling in her chest. They'd be lucky to have you, David replied, ruffling her hair. That weekend, the two of them showed up at the local shelter, Zeus trotting beside them, his tail high. The shelter director recognized them immediately, waving them in with a warm smile. "We'd love your help, Ella," she said. "And Zeus, too. He could be an ambassador for our scared dogs. Show people that even the most frightened animal can change with a little patience." Zeus took to the shelter visits like he was born for them. At first, he was nervous, sticking close to Ella and David as they walked through rows of barking, anxious dogs. But soon he began to relax, offering gentle nose touches to trembling puppies, standing still while curious children reached out hesitant hands. The transformation was remarkable, not just in Zeus, but in the people around him. One morning, as a young boy clung to his mother's leg, afraid to approach the kennels, Zeus quietly lay down at the boy's feet. The boy looked into Zeus's gentle eyes and, after a long moment, reached out to pet him. Ella's heart nearly burst with pride. Word spread through the school as well. The teacher, inspired by Ella's courage, launched a reading program for students who were afraid of dogs. Twice a month, Ella and Zeus sat in the library's sunny corner while nervous children took turns reading stories aloud to Zeus. Each child left a little braver, their fear replaced by laughter and joy. Maya, who had once shied away from Zeus, soon became his biggest champion. She started telling everyone she knew about Ella's story, convincing her own family to foster a senior beagle from the shelter. "I never thought I could do it," Maya admitted to Ella one afternoon, as the beagle snoozed in her lap. "But you showed me how. You and Zeus." Miss Carla, always quietly encouraging, suggested that Ella and David start a workshop for kids and parents in the neighborhood. "Call it Kindness and Canines," she said. "You have so much to teach others, about patience, empathy, and never giving up on those who need you most." The first workshop was held at the local park, beneath the wide arms of a sprawling oak. Parents brought folding chairs and coolers, while children clustered around Zeus and the other shelter dogs who came to visit. Miss Carla began with simple lessons on how to greet a nervous animal: soft voices, slow movements, open hands. Ella shared stories of Zeus's journey, her voice shy at first but growing stronger as she saw the rapt attention of her audience. "Sometimes people just need a chance," Ella told the group. "Dogs, too. When you show someone you believe in them, even when they're scared or angry, it changes things. It changed everything for me and Zeus." Afterward, the children took turns practicing what they'd learned. Even kids who'd once been afraid of dogs now laughed and played, their confidence growing with every moment. Parents chatted, swapping stories about their own pets and the lessons their children were learning. It was as if the whole community was waking up to a new way of seeing, not just dogs, but each other. News of Ella and Zeus's workshops reached the local paper, then spread to social media, and soon they were receiving invitations to visit other schools and libraries in nearby towns. David was amazed by how quickly the story traveled, but he was even more amazed by the changes in his daughter. Ella, who had once been quiet and withdrawn after the divorce, now moved through the world with newfound confidence. She greeted neighbors on her way to school, helped younger kids cross the street, and even volunteered to speak at a town hall meeting about animal welfare. Zeus, too, continued to blossom. He participated in Reading with Rescues days at the library, lying patiently beside nervous readers and wagging his tail whenever someone stumbled over a word. He led a parade of rescued dogs at the annual Pets and Kids Festival, his fur glossy and his eyes bright with happiness. People who had once avoided Zeus now asked for his advice, and parents who had been wary of adopting a rescue dog signed up for Miss Carla's next workshop. Even Mr. Ramirez, the old neighbor with the gentle laugh, took in a small stray after seeing Zeus's transformation, "If that dog can change," he told David, "so can I." Ella's house, once quiet and heavy with worry, became a hub of activity. Friends gathered for weekend cookouts in the backyard, where dogs of all sizes chased each other under the watchful gaze of Zeus. The laughter of children rang through the neighborhood, and even the adults seemed lighter, more willing to help one another. Late one evening, after a particularly joyful workshop, Ella sat with David on the porch. Zeus stretched out between them. Fireflies danced above the grass, and the air hummed with peace. David looked at his daughter, marveling at how far they'd come. "You know, Ella," he said, "I used to think families were just the people you were born with. But I think maybe family is really about who you choose to stand by, who you show up for, no matter what." Ella nodded, her eyes bright. "That's what Zeus taught me," she whispered. "We found each other when we needed it most." David smiled, pulling her close. "And now you're helping everyone else find that too." Zeus raised his head, as if in agreement, and let out a happy huff. Together they watched the stars bloom above them, hearts full of hope and gratitude. For Ella and her dog, and the whole community that had learned from their journey, life was richer, kinder, and more beautiful than ever before. As the seasons shifted from the lazy warmth of late summer into the gentle cool of autumn, Ella found herself thinking more deeply about everything she and Zeus had been through. The swirl of the past year was sometimes hard to believe. How a frightened, broken dog rescued from a flea market had become a hero, a friend, and the heart of a whole community. But perhaps the biggest changes were the ones that couldn't be captured in photographs or newspaper stories. The quiet, invisible ways that both she and Zeus had healed. Some evenings, Ella would sit in her room, pen in hand, her diary open across her knees. She liked to write down her thoughts, to try and make sense of the tangled feelings inside her. Often, Zeus would be stretched out on the floor beside her, his tail thumping gently whenever she reached down to scratch his ears. She wrote about bravery, the loud, obvious kind, like when Zeus had stood his ground against the pit bull, but also the softer kind that most people never noticed. Like the courage it took to show up, day after day, for someone who was hurting, or the strength to forgive people who didn't understand. Ella realized that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was to keep loving, even after you'd been hurt. "Healing takes time and belief," she wrote one night, her letters curling and slow. "Zeus didn't change overnight, and neither did I. There were days when everything felt impossible, when I wanted to give up, or when the old voices told me I was crazy for trying. But we kept showing up for each other, even when it was hard. That's how you get better. That's how you become family." The word family had taken on a whole new meaning for Ella. After her mom left, she'd felt adrift, like she was floating alone in a sea of sadness and anger. She had missed the sound of her parents laughing together, the warmth of their old Saturday pancake breakfasts, and the simple certainty that home would always be a safe place. For a long time, she'd been afraid she would never feel that way again. But in caring for Zeus and in letting herself be cared for, Ella discovered something new, that family could be built, not just inherited. It was made of the people and animals who showed up for you, who stood by you in the hard times, who forgave your mistakes and celebrated your victories. True family, she realized, was about loyalty, patience, and love. Sometimes it took losing the family you thought you'd always have to understand just how precious and how possible it was to make a new one. David felt this transformation too. He noticed it in the way laughter echoed through their house again, in the inside jokes he and Ella shared, in the comfort he found sitting quietly beside her and Zeus after long days at work. He began to let go of some of his old fears, that he would never be enough for his daughter, that the wounds left by the divorce would never heal. "You let us here, Ella," he told her one night as they washed dishes together. "You and Zeus, you taught me that showing up every day, even when you're scared, is what love really means." Ella also learned the strange, freeing power of forgiveness. She remembered the kids at school who had teased her, called Zeus dangerous, or made fun of her for believing in him. For a long time, those memories had stung, but now she found herself letting go. She could see now that their cruelty had come from fear, from not understanding what it was like to be different, or to love something everyone else thought was broken. When one of those kids nervously approached her at the playground and asked if they could meet Zeus, Ella didn't hesitate. She smiled, offered the leash, and watched as fear turned to wonder. It felt good, not just to forgive, but to help someone else learn what she had learned. Even the vendor from the flea market drifted through her thoughts. There was a time when Ella had hated him, wished he would just disappear. But now she felt something different, a kind of sad compassion. She realized that anger and bitterness trapped people, just as surely as any chain. "Maybe," she wrote in her diary, "some people need someone to believe in them too. Maybe that's the hardest kind of healing." Zeus changed too. He was still wary of strangers, sometimes flinched at loud noises, but his spirit was lighter now. He wagged his tail more, chased leaves in the backyard, and welcomed Maya and her friends with happy barks. On walks, he held his head high, unafraid of the world around him. Every night, he would curl up at the foot of Ella's bed, a gentle, living reminder that second chances really were possible. The changes rippled outward, touching more than just their little family. Maya, once terrified of dogs, now volunteered at the shelter every weekend. Mrs. Willis, who had once crossed the street to avoid Zeus, started fostering kittens. Even Mr. Ramirez, who had lost his own dog years before, joined Ella and David for coffee on the porch, sharing stories and laughter late into the night. The whole neighborhood felt warmer, more open, a place where people looked out for one another, where help was always close at hand. Ella saw how a single act of kindness could spread, growing from one heart to another, until it transformed everything it touched. She knew that she and Zeus had started something important, and that the lessons they'd learned together would last for the rest of their lives. As autumn leaves swirled across the yard, Ella sat on the porch swing, her diary balanced on her knees, Zeus's head heavy in her lap. She watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, and felt a quiet, powerful certainty settle in her heart. "Family is who shows up," she wrote, "not just who you're related to. Healing happens little by little, every day you choose to love. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is believe, in yourself, in others, in the possibility that things can get better. That's what Zeus taught me. That's what I want to teach others too." As dusk settled, David stepped onto the porch, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Together they watched Zeus chase a moth across the grass, his bark ringing out in joyful abandon. Ella knew there would always be hard days, setbacks, old wounds, fears that came creeping back. But now she understood that she wasn't alone, with Zeus and her dad by her side, and a community built on second chances. She felt ready for whatever the future would bring. And somewhere, deep inside, she knew the journey they'd begun together would never really end. Every day was another chance to choose kindness, to forgive, to show up, and to love. 1 year after Zeus first came home, Ella woke up to the smell of pancakes and the sound of laughter floating down the hallway. The morning sun painted stripes across her walls, and she stretched with a quiet joy that felt new and familiar at the same time. It was the day of the annual Pets and Kids Festival, an event the town had hosted for decades, but this year it felt different. This year, the festival's theme was Second Chances, inspired by the story of a little girl and her once-chained dog. Downstairs, David was humming along to the radio, flipping pancakes with more confidence than usual. Zeus was already in the kitchen, tail thumping in anticipation of breakfast. Ella grinned as she slid into her seat, rubbing Zeus's ears. "Today's your big day, buddy." After breakfast, Ella and David dressed in matching shirts printed with the words, "Kindness Crew." Zeus wore a bright blue bandana that Maya had decorated with painted paw prints and the word "Hero." The three of them set off, joining a parade of children and pets winding through Main Street, banners fluttering overhead, dogs barking, and laughter filling the air. The whole town seemed to be celebrating not just Zeus, but every animal and person who'd ever needed a new start. At the festival, Ella found herself surrounded by familiar faces: Ms. Carla, Maya and her family, Mrs. Willis with her little boy, Mr. Ramirez, and so many others who'd been touched by Zeus's journey. Some brought their adopted pets. Others simply came to say thank you or to listen. For the first time, Ella didn't feel nervous speaking in front of a crowd. She knew her story by heart, and she could see in the eyes of those around her that it mattered. When it was time for her speech, Ella walked onto the small stage in the town park, Zeus by her side, his leash loose in her hand. She glanced at her dad, who gave her an encouraging nod, and at Maya, who grinned from the front row. Ella took a deep breath and spoke, not just from memory, but from the very heart of her experience. "When I met Zeus, he was chained and afraid. I know how that feels," she began, her voice strong and clear. "Sometimes people get scared or lost or left out. Sometimes you feel like nobody wants you, or like you'll never fit in again. But kindness is stronger than chains. Love is stronger than fear. Zeus taught me that it's never too late for a second chance. For dogs, for people, for families." She paused, letting her words sink in. The park was silent, all eyes on her. If you ever see someone who's scared, or lonely, or left out, be the person who stays. Be the one who tries, who believes, even when it's hard. Sometimes that's all it takes to change a life. It changed mine. And it changed Zeus's too. The crowd erupted in applause. Zeus barked once, tail wagging as if to say, "That's right." David wiped away a tear, and Miss Carla beamed with pride. After the speech, the parade began. Ella and Zeus led a line of rescued dogs and children around the park, each one wearing a ribbon with their name and the date they'd found their forever home. Along the route, people clapped and cheered, some reaching out to pet Zeus or to shake Ella's hand. She felt like she was walking on air, every step a reminder of how far she and Zeus had come. David, once so uncertain, was now a leader in the local rescue effort. He organized volunteer days at the shelter, started a donation drive for pet food, and made sure every family who adopted a new dog got a handwritten note of encouragement. Maya's parents had adopted another senior dog, and Maya herself had become a youth advocate for animal welfare, speaking at other schools, and even helping shy classmates learn how to approach animals gently. Miss Carla and Ella ran kindness and canines workshops every other weekend. The program grew bigger each month, with new volunteers, new foster families, and children eager to learn about empathy, patience, and trust. Their neighborhood, once wary and closed off, became a model for others. Neighbors checking on one another, lost pets reunited with their families, and even old Mr. Ramirez adopting a pair of kittens after years alone. One of the biggest surprises was the letters that began arriving from nearby towns and even other states. People wrote to Ella and David, sharing their own stories of adopting a scared dog, or of learning to forgive, or of how they'd been inspired to show kindness to someone in need. Ella would read each letter out loud in the evenings, sitting beside Zeus, marveling at how a single act of love could ripple out into the world, touching lives she would never meet. As the festival drew to a close, the sun dipped low, turning the park golden. Ella, David, Maya, Miss Carla, and their friends gathered for a group photo. Dogs sprawled in the grass, kids with painted faces, parents and volunteers side by side. Zeus, now healthy and proud, sat front and center, his eyes shining with happiness and trust. Later, as dusk fell and the park emptied, Ella found herself walking with Zeus at the edge of the playground. She watched him sniff the air, his tail swishing contentedly, and she thought of all the days when she'd feared he might never heal. She remembered the court battle, the hard moments, the setbacks, and the hope that sometimes felt impossible to hold on to. And she realized that together, they had done something bigger than either of them could have imagined. She knelt beside Zeus, wrapping her arms around his thick neck. "We made it, boy. We really did." Zeus licked her cheek, then flopped into the grass with a groan of happiness. They watched the stars appear above the trees, the world quiet and gentle around them. On the walk home, Ella took David's hand. "Do you think other people will remember what we learned?" she asked. David smiled. "I know they will. You didn't just save Zeus, Ella. You showed everyone what's possible when you don't give up." As they reached their front porch, Ella turned back for one last look at the park, now empty but still shimmering with memories and laughter. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more dogs and people in need of second chances. But now, she was ready. Inside, the house was filled with warmth and light. Friends' thank you cards lined the mantel, and Zeus's blue bandana hung next to the leash, a symbol of every hard-won victory. Ella curled up on the couch, Zeus's head in her lap, and closed her eyes, feeling utterly at peace. She knew their story wasn't really over, because every day was another chance to believe, to try, to forgive, to love. Every day was a gift, a chance to set someone free, and maybe in the process, to find yourself set free as well. As sleep crept in, Ella's last thought was simple and strong. No matter how broken the world might seem, kindness will always make it whole again.